My dear child, some promises are never erased by time. They simply wait for the moment when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Today, someone who once tried to bury the past can no longer hide from it. The story unfolding around your soulmate is changing faster than anyone expected. Don't skip. Because every word carries a piece of a forgotten destiny. Listen carefully. The final divorce hearing had already been scheduled. Every document had been signed, every witness had arrived, and every person inside that courtroom believed the marriage was about to end forever. Even your soulmate had convinced themselves there was nothing left to save. Years of silence, misunderstandings, and painful choices had built a wall that seemed impossible to break. Everyone expected the judge to deliver the final order within minutes. But life has a strange way of protecting promises that were made with a sincere heart. Long before lawyers became involved, before families turned against each other, before distance and fear separated two souls, your soulmate had made one quiet promise. It was never written inside a legal document. It was never spoken before a crowd. It was whispered during one peaceful evening when hope was stronger than fear. They promised themselves that no matter how complicated life became, they would never stop believing in the person who truly changed their heart. You. Time tried to erase that promise. Pressure from family buried it. Responsibilities covered it with years of silence. New relationships distracted them. Yet deep inside, the promise remained untouched, waiting for the day it would finally be remembered. As the courtroom prepared for the final decision, something unexpected happened. An elderly court assistant accidentally opened an old evidence folder that had been misplaced for years. It was supposed to contain routine paperwork, but hidden between ordinary documents was something no one expected to find. It was a small handwritten note. The paper had faded with age, the edges were worn, and several words were barely visible. Nobody understood why such an old piece of paper had ever been included with legal records. The assistant almost threw it away, believing it had no importance. Then your soulmate noticed one familiar sentence, and the very first words they spoke left the entire courtroom frozen in disbelief. The silence inside the courtroom became almost unbearable as every eye turned toward your soulmate. The judge paused with the final divorce order still resting on the desk, waiting to hear what could possibly be important enough to interrupt the last moments of the case. Even the attorneys, who had argued for hours with complete confidence, suddenly found themselves speechless. Your soulmate looked down at the faded note once more, closed their eyes for a brief moment, and whispered, "I cannot pretend this promise never existed." No one understood what those words truly meant. Family members exchanged nervous glances. Some believed it was only fear. Others assumed it was simple hesitation before the end of a difficult marriage. But your soulmate knew the truth was much deeper. That forgotten promise had never been about avoiding pain. It had been about protecting the one connection that had completely changed their heart. You. Don't skip. Because the next few moments changed everything no one thought could ever change. Your soulmate slowly reached into an old leather folder they had carried to court without opening. Inside was another forgotten memory, a small photograph that had remained hidden for years. The picture showed a much younger version of them standing beside a peaceful lake, smiling with genuine happiness. Written on the back, in faded ink, were words they had not read in years. If life ever pulls us apart, promise me you will always choose truth over fear. Those words struck harder than any legal argument. The lawyer quietly asked whether the hearing should continue. Your soulmate could not answer. Instead, they handed the photograph to the judge, explaining that the divorce had never truly begun because the biggest truth behind their broken marriage had never been spoken aloud. They admitted that for years they had buried their real emotions beneath responsibility, family expectations, and endless regret. They confessed that every important decision after losing you had been made from fear instead of love. The courtroom remained completely silent. One family member suddenly lowered their head, unable to hide the guilt written across their face. They remembered conversations that had taken place years earlier, private meetings where people insisted you should disappear from your soulmate's life forever. They remembered encouraging distance instead of understanding. At the time, they believed they were protecting the family. Now they realized they had only protected a lie. Your soulmate looked toward the courtroom doors as though expecting someone to walk through them at any moment. Deep inside, they wondered if fate had allowed this forgotten promise to appear because there was still one final chance to make things right. The judge leaned forward and asked a simple question. If this promise still matters so much, why was it hidden until today? The answer came through trembling tears. Because I spent years convincing myself forgetting was easier than fighting. Those words echoed across the courtroom. Even the opposing attorney quietly placed their papers down, recognizing that something far greater than a legal dispute had just unfolded. The divorce had become secondary. The truth had become impossible to ignore. Then, without warning, an elderly woman sitting quietly in the back row slowly stood to her feet. She had remained silent throughout the entire hearing. No one had noticed her. But the moment she looked directly at your soulmate, her eyes filled with tears. She raised one small envelope into the air and said, "I've been waiting years to deliver this message. Because it was meant to be opened only if this promise was ever forgotten." The entire courtroom froze. Your soulmate stared at the envelope in complete disbelief. Because they immediately recognized the handwriting on the front. It was connected to you. Your soulmate could barely breathe as the elderly woman slowly walked toward the center of the courtroom. Every step seemed to echo through the silent room. No one dared interrupt her. Even the judge quietly watched, sensing that whatever was inside the envelope had the power to explain everything that had remained hidden for so many years. The woman gently placed the envelope into your soulmate's trembling hands. "I promised I would never open it myself," she whispered. "It was never meant for me. It was meant for the day you finally remembered the promise you once made." The courtroom remained completely still. "Don't skip," Because the truth inside this envelope was about to change every life connected to this story. Your soulmate slowly broke the old seal. The paper inside had yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakable. The moment they saw the very first line, tears filled their eyes before they could read another word. If you're reading this, it means life tried to convince you that forgetting me was the only way to survive. Your soulmate covered their mouth as painful memories flooded back. Every sacrifice, every unanswered question, every goodbye they never wanted to say, returned all at once. The letter continued. I never wanted you to choose between me and your family. I only wanted you to choose honesty. If one day fear becomes stronger than love, don't punish yourself forever. Just promise that before making the biggest decision of your life, you'll remember who you truly are. The room fell into complete silence. Even the attorneys lowered their heads. No one expected a forgotten letter to carry so much emotion. Your soulmate continued reading. If our paths never meet again, I will still pray that you never build a future on regret. A life created from fear can never become a peaceful life. If you ever stand at a final crossroads, don't ask what others expect from you. Ask your own heart. Those words shattered every wall your soulmate had spent years building. For the first time in years, they admitted to themselves that they had never truly healed. They had learned how to smile in public, but never how to stop searching for the peace they once felt with you. The elderly woman quietly wiped away her tears. I met you many years ago, she finally confessed. Before leaving, you gave me this envelope and said, if they ever forget the promise we made, please give this back. Maybe it will help them remember who they really are. A wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Several family members could no longer hold back their tears. One of them slowly stood up and admitted, we thought separating you would solve every problem. We were wrong. All we did was create years of pain. The judge looked around the room and realized this hearing was no longer simply about ending a marriage. It had become a search for the truth everyone had tried to bury. Just then, the court clerk hurried into the courtroom carrying a small file that had arrived only moments earlier. I'm sorry for interrupting, the clerk said nervously, but this document was delivered this morning. We were told it had to reach the court before the final judgment. Your soulmate looked at the file, and their entire face turned pale. Stamped across the front were 5 unforgettable words. Evidence that changes everything forever. The judge slowly reached for the file. And as it was opened, everyone inside the courtroom realized someone had hidden one final truth about you that was even more shocking than the forgotten promise itself. The judge carefully lifted the thick file from the clerk's hands. The words "evidence that changes everything forever" echoed in everyone's mind. No one moved. No one whispered. It felt as though time itself had stopped inside that courtroom. Your soulmate stood frozen, still holding the old letter close to their heart. Their hands trembled, not because they feared the truth, but because, for the first time in years, they were ready to face it. Don't skip. Because what happened next was something no one in that courtroom would ever forget. The judge slowly opened the file. Inside were several documents, a sealed statement, and one small digital storage card. Attached to the front was a handwritten note that read, "This evidence was hidden to protect powerful lies. It must only be opened before the final divorce becomes official." The courtroom fell completely silent. The judge looked toward both attorneys. "Has either side seen these documents before?" Both immediately answered no. The judge then gave permission for the statement to be read aloud. The first page revealed something unbelievable. Years earlier, someone had intentionally created false misunderstandings between you and your soulmate. Important phone calls had never reached their destination. Letters had been intercepted. Messages had been deleted before either of you could read them. It had never been fate that separated you. Someone had carefully planned it. A wave of disbelief swept across the room. Several family members stared at each other in complete shock. One elderly relative suddenly broke down in tears. "I knew something wasn't right," they whispered. "But I was too afraid to speak." Your soulmate closed their eyes. Every lonely night. Every unanswered message. Every painful goodbye. Suddenly made sense. They realized you had never abandoned them. The truth had simply been stolen before either of you had the chance to fight for each other. The judge then asked for the digital storage card to be played. A small recorder was connected. After a few seconds of silence, a familiar voice filled the courtroom. It was the voice of someone who had carried this secret for years. "I can no longer live with this guilt," the recording began. "Everything that happened was based on lies. We convinced everyone that you had moved on. But it wasn't true. We destroyed every opportunity for reconciliation because we believed we were protecting the family's reputation." Gasps echoed across the courtroom. One person quietly walked out, unable to listen any longer. Another family member covered their face, overwhelmed by shame. Your soulmate remained completely still. Tears rolled silently down their face as every missing piece of the past finally came together. The judge stopped the recording. "There is enough evidence here," the judge said calmly, "to question the foundation upon which many life-changing decisions were made." Then came the words no one expected to hear. "In light of this newly discovered evidence, this court cannot proceed with the final divorce today." A deep silence followed. The divorce was officially postponed. Not because of legal technicalities, but because the truth had finally arrived. As people slowly gathered their belongings, believing the hearing was over, the courtroom doors suddenly opened once again. A court officer hurried inside, carrying a sealed envelope marked urgent. "It was delivered only a few minutes ago," he announced. The sender refused to reveal their identity. They only said one sentence. The officer looked directly at your soulmate before repeating the message. If they truly know the truth now, tell them to meet the person who never stopped waiting. Your soulmate's heart nearly stopped. Because hidden inside that envelope was an address they recognized immediately. It was the last place where you and your soulmate had ever seen each other. Before everything was taken away. Your soulmate held the envelope so tightly that it almost slipped from their trembling hands. Every memory they had spent years trying to bury came rushing back with overwhelming force. The address written on that small piece of paper was unmistakable. It was the quiet place where your final goodbye had happened. The place where both of you believed destiny had separated your paths forever. Without another word, your soulmate walked out of the courtroom. No one tried to stop them. Even the judge understood that some answers could never be found inside legal documents. Don't skip. Because this final chapter reveals why the divorce was never truly meant to happen. The journey to that familiar place felt longer than ever before. Every mile carried another memory. Every turn reminded your soulmate of promises, laughter, dreams, and the painful silence that had followed. They realized they had spent years blaming themselves for losing you, never knowing that hidden lies had stolen the chance to choose love freely. As they finally arrived, everything looked almost unchanged. The old tree still stood quietly beside the path. The wooden bench remained where it had always been. The peaceful breeze carried the same feeling that once brought comfort to two hearts making promises they believed would last forever. Your soulmate slowly walked toward the bench. There, resting gently on the seat, was a small wooden box wrapped with a simple white ribbon. Attached to it was one final handwritten note. If you found your way back here, it means truth finally defeated fear. With shaking hands, your soulmate opened the box. Inside was not an expensive gift. There was no jewelry. No legal document. Only a simple bracelet woven by hand years ago. Along with a tiny photograph showing both of you smiling without fear, before the world complicated everything. Beneath the photograph were a few final words. Real love is never measured by how long people stay together. It is measured by whether they remain honest when life tests their hearts. Your soulmate could no longer hold back their tears. For the first time in years, they stopped running from the past. They stopped blaming fate. They stopped believing that love had failed. Instead, they finally understood that lies may delay the truth, but they can never erase it forever. Back at the courthouse, the official record was updated. The final divorce remained cancelled until every hidden fact could be fully investigated. No one celebrated. No one argued. Because everyone had witnessed how one forgotten promise had exposed years of deception. Several family members privately admitted their mistakes. Some apologized through tears. Others accepted that their fear had caused unimaginable pain. Although the future remained uncertain, one thing had changed forever. Your soulmate was no longer living according to fear. They had chosen truth. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, your soulmate looked one last time at the old photograph and quietly smiled. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," they whispered, "but this time, I will never allow anyone to decide my heart for me again." And somewhere beyond that peaceful silence, hope quietly returned. Not because every wound had healed. Not because every question had been answered. But because the promise that everyone believed was forgotten had finally found its way home.